Ellen DeGeneres had encountered guests with various social anxieties and communication challenges throughout her decades-long career, from individuals struggling with public speaking to those working through interpersonal difficulties, but nothing could have prepared her for the afternoon, when what seemed like a routine interview about building confidence and self-acceptance would evolve into one of the most bizarre and psychologically revealing situations she had ever experienced. What started as a conversation about overcoming people-pleasing behaviors became an inexplicable epidemic of compulsive apologizing that would force everyone in the studio to confront their relationship with guilt, responsibility, and the exhausting human tendency to apologize for their very existence. It was a serene Wednesday afternoon at the Ellen Studios, and the atmosphere was supportive as they prepared for what was scheduled to be an encouraging episode about self-esteem, boundary setting, and learning to value one's own needs and opinions. Ellen, wearing a soft lilac blazer over cream-colored pants, was looking forward to interviewing Dr. Amanda Foster, a 38-year-old therapist and author whose book about overcoming chronic people-pleasing and excessive apologizing had become a bestseller and was helping thousands of people develop healthier communication patterns and stronger self-advocacy skills. Dr. Foster's work was exactly the kind of empowering content that Ellen loved to feature: evidence-based strategies for building confidence, practical techniques for setting boundaries, and research-backed approaches to developing authentic self-worth that didn't depend on constantly seeking approval from others. According to her preliminary materials, Dr. Foster had overcome her own struggles with compulsive apologizing and people-pleasing behaviors, had developed innovative therapeutic approaches for helping others break these patterns, and was passionate about helping people understand the difference between genuine accountability and unnecessary self-blame. Our next guest has written the book, literally, on how to stop apologizing for everything and start advocating for yourself. Ellen announced to the attentive studio audience, her work is helping people break free from the exhausting cycle of constantly saying sorry for things that don't require apologies. Her message is simple but revolutionary. You don't have to apologize for taking up space in the world. Please welcome therapist and author Dr. Amanda Foster. The audience offered warm, encouraging applause as Dr. Foster walked onto the stage with confident, purposeful steps. She was a poised woman with shoulder-length brown hair and wearing a professional emerald green dress that conveyed both approachability and authority. What struck Ellen most was the calm, grounded energy Dr. Foster projected, someone who seemed genuinely comfortable with herself and unafraid to take up appropriate space in any environment. Dr. Foster, welcome to the show, Ellen said warmly as they embraced briefly. Thank you so much for having me, Ellen. I'm excited to be here, Dr. Foster replied, her voice carrying clear confidence without any of the apologetic qualifiers that many guests unconsciously used. Let's talk about chronic apologizing. How common is this pattern, and why do so many people fall into it? Dr. Foster's expression became professionally engaged as she began explaining her research. Ellen, chronic apologizing is incredibly common, especially among women and people who grew up in environments where they felt they had to minimize themselves to avoid conflict or criticism. It starts as a survival mechanism but becomes a prison that prevents authentic self-expression. Can you give us some examples of unnecessary apologizing that people might not even notice they're doing? Absolutely. Apologizing for asking questions, apologizing for having needs, apologizing for taking up time or space, apologizing for their opinions, even apologizing for apologizing, Dr. Foster explained. Many people say sorry before expressing any preference or making any request. As Dr. Foster spoke, Ellen noticed something unusual beginning to happen in the studio. One of the camera operators seemed to be whispering sorry repeatedly to his equipment, and an audience member in the front row appeared to be mouthing apologies to the person next to her for no apparent reason. Dr. Foster, sorry to interrupt, but I'm noticing some strange behavior in the studio, Ellen said, then immediately caught herself. Wait, why did I just apologize for doing my job as an interviewer? Dr. Foster looked around the studio with growing concern. Ellen, I'm seeing it too. That's exactly the kind of reflexive apologizing we were just discussing, but it seems to be spreading through the room. Ellen felt an overwhelming urge to apologize to Dr. Foster for bringing up the interruption. "I'm sorry for mentioning it. Sorry, I just did it again. Dr. Foster, I'm sorry, but I think something unusual is happening here." "Ellen, please don't apologize," Dr. Foster said firmly, but then immediately added, "Sorry, I didn't mean to be so direct about telling you not to apologize. Sorry for being sorry about being direct." Both women looked at each other with alarm as they realized they were caught in the very pattern they had been discussing, but in an exaggerated and seemingly uncontrollable way. From the audience, Ellen could hear a growing chorus of whispered apologies. People were saying sorry to their seats, to each other, to the air around them. The sound technician was apologizing to his soundboard, and Ellen could see producers in the booth appearing to apologize to their equipment. "Dr. Foster, I'm sorry, but this is really weird," Ellen said, unable to stop herself from continuing the apology pattern. "Sorry for calling it weird. Sorry for saying sorry. This is getting ridiculous, and I'm sorry for saying it's ridiculous." Dr. Foster was visibly struggling with the same compulsion. "Ellen, sorry to disagree, but I think we need to figure out what's causing this. Sorry for contradicting you. Sorry for saying sorry for contradicting you." Ellen turned to address the audience, most of whom were now openly apologizing for various inexplicable things. "Folks, sorry to interrupt the show, but something strange is happening. Sorry for saying it's strange. Does anyone know why we're all apologizing constantly?" A woman in the third row stood up, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Ellen, but I can't stop saying sorry. I'm sorry for crying. I'm sorry for standing up. I'm sorry for taking up time. I'm sorry for apologizing so much." Ellen felt overwhelmed by the epidemic of apologies surrounding her. "Dr. Foster, sorry to put you on the spot, but as the expert here, can you explain what's happening? Sorry for calling you an expert. Sorry for asking you to explain something that might be unexplainable." Dr. Foster was clearly struggling to maintain her professional composure while fighting the compulsive apologizing. "Ellen, sorry, but I think we're experiencing a collective manifestation of the exact pattern I study. Sorry for using clinical language. Everyone in this room is demonstrating the exhausting cycle of unnecessary apologies that most people live with internally." "But why is it happening out loud and to everyone at once?" Ellen asked, then immediately added, "Sorry for asking such a difficult question." "Sorry, Ellen, but I think your show has somehow created a space where people's internal apologizing patterns are becoming external," Dr. Foster replied. "Sorry for psychoanalyzing your show. Most people carry this constant stream of self-blame and unnecessary guilt, but they keep it inside. Here, it's becoming audible." Ellen felt a growing sense of horror as she recognized the implications of what Dr. Foster was suggesting. "Are you saying that all these apologies we're hearing represent how people actually feel about themselves all the time?" "Sorry to say this, Ellen, but yes. Sorry for confirming something so depressing," Dr. Foster said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Most people are constantly apologizing to themselves for existing, for having needs, for taking up space. Sorry for making this about my work. Sorry for being emotional about my work." Ellen looked around the studio at the dozens of people caught in this cycle of compulsive apologizing and felt her heart breaking for the collective pain it represented. "Dr. Foster, sorry to ask, but how do we make this stop?" "Sorry, Ellen, but I think the only way to break this cycle is to stop apologizing," Dr. Foster said with sudden determination. "Sorry for stating the obvious. No, wait. I'm not sorry for stating the obvious because it needed to be stated." Ellen felt a slight shift as Dr. Foster's refusal to apologize for her last statement seemed to create a small break in the pattern. "You're right, you don't need to apologize for your expertise or for telling us what we need to hear." Dr. Foster straightened her shoulders and spoke with growing confidence. "Ellen, everyone in this room is apologizing because they've been conditioned to believe that their presence, their needs, and their thoughts are impositions on others. But that's not true. Ellen felt a compulsive need to apologize beginning to weaken as Dr. Foster spoke with conviction. Dr. Foster, what if instead of apologizing for taking up space, we claimed our right to exist? Exactly, Dr. Foster exclaimed, her voice growing stronger. Ellen, you don't need to apologize for hosting this show. Audience members don't need to apologize for being here. Crew members don't need to apologize for doing their jobs. Ellen addressed the audience with newfound determination. Everyone, Dr. Foster is right. We're going to stop apologizing for things that don't require apologies, right now. As Ellen spoke these words with authority rather than apology, the chorus of whispered sorries began to diminish throughout the studio. I'm not sorry for asking questions, Ellen declared loudly. I'm not sorry for having opinions. I'm not sorry for taking up time and space to have important conversations. Dr. Foster joined in with growing enthusiasm. I'm not sorry for my expertise. I'm not sorry for writing a book about this topic. I'm not sorry for being passionate about helping people. From the audience, the woman who had been crying stood up again. I'm not sorry for having emotions. I'm not sorry for speaking up. I'm not sorry for being here. One by one, other audience members began declaring things they would no longer apologize for. I'm not sorry for my accent. I'm not sorry for being tall. I'm not sorry for laughing loudly. I'm not sorry for crying easily. Ellen felt a profound shift in the energy of the studio as the epidemic of apologies transformed into a celebration of unapologetic self-acceptance. Dr. Foster, what we're witnessing right now is exactly what you write about, isn't it? Yes, Ellen. This is what happens when people stop apologizing for their authentic selves and start claiming their right to exist fully and unapologetically, Dr. Foster replied with obvious satisfaction. Ellen turned to address the cameras with new understanding. Folks, what happened here today shows us how much energy we waste apologizing for things that are actually perfectly normal parts of being human. She looked back at Dr. Foster with appreciation. Dr. Foster, thank you for helping us break this cycle. What would you want people to remember from this experience? I'd want them to remember that apologies should be reserved for actual harm or mistakes, not for existing, having needs, or expressing themselves authentically, Dr. Foster said clearly. Your presence in the world is not an imposition, it's a contribution. 3 months later, Ellen received hundreds of letters from viewers who had been inspired by the episode to examine their own apologizing patterns. Many shared that they had started noticing how often they unnecessarily apologized and had begun practicing unapologetic self-advocacy. 6 months later, Dr. Foster returned to the show to discuss the impact of that episode on her practice and research. She reported that the concept of unapologetic authenticity had resonated with thousands of people who were learning to differentiate between genuine accountability and unnecessary self-blame. What that day taught me, Ellen reflected months later, is that most of us are carrying around an enormous burden of guilt for simply being ourselves. Dr. Foster showed us that learning to stop apologizing for our existence is actually a revolutionary act of self-love. The episode became a cultural moment that sparked conversations about people-pleasing, boundary setting, and the importance of claiming space without apology. Sometimes, Ellen would say in subsequent interviews, the most radical thing we can do is simply refuse to apologize for being human. Dr. Foster reminded us that we don't owe the world an apology for taking up the space we deserve. Because sometimes the most profound healing happens when we stop saying sorry for existing and start celebrating our right to be fully, authentically, unapologetically ourselves.